Well, let me welcome you. My name is Mark Ray. I'm Executive Director of the Grace Center for Spiritual Development here as an extension of Grace School of Theology. I want to welcome you to Grace Cafe, the opportunity for us to have a casual conversation with guests of wide variety and of great interest. Before I get started, let me ask you this question. We're coming up on the Advent season. And in coming up on the Advent season, the question that I want to ask you is this. Are you tired of reading the same Advent book over and over and over again, year after year after year? Maybe you've got a favorite. And if you have a favorite, that's wonderful. But I'm going to introduce you to a good friend of mine, Brandon Shuman, who has written a brand new Advent book that is different than any Advent book you've ever seen or you've ever experienced. It's actually a book that you can engage with. We're really excited to have him as a guest. Brandon is the Dean of Arts and Humanities at Midland Classical Academy in Midland, Texas. I got the chance to be exposed to Brandon as a pastor in that church and got to hear him actually recite a number of these Advent devotions. And they're spectacular. They're wonderful. He even gave me the privilege of writing a little bit of a recommendation for it. And I'm just thrilled that this is finally coming to fruition. Brandon, great to see you, my friend. Welcome. Glad you're here with us on Grace Cafe.
It's good to see you too, Mark, and thank you for having me.
It's absolutely our pleasure. It's been too long with us not having a chance to engage with each other in good discussion. Well, let me kind of dive right in because this Advent book is something very different from what most normal people get from an Advent devotion. Typically, they might get a 25-day short one-page devotional study. They might get a beautifully printed book. They might even think of an Advent calendar with the 24 days associated with that. But this is very different. Before we get into what makes it different, let me ask you this question, and that is, what was your inspiration for this? Why write an Advent book?
Well, I was sitting around and I thought, you know what the world needs? The world needs another Advent book. And so that was how I was going to make my mark in the world, is just write another Advent book. Seriously, though, it was about 12 years ago, and it was around Christmas time, and I was just discontent with some things that were going on in the world that were beyond my control. And I started to complain to God, and just like, God, why are you letting these things happen? Don't you care for me? Don't you care for us? And of course the answer is, of course he does. And I knew all those right answers, but just kind of within my heart, I was putting my hope in the wrong idols. And so I sat down at my house, complained to God, and then just, I guess kind of like Jonas, like, okay, I'm going to listen. Now it's your turn, God. And because it was Christmas, my thoughts naturally went to the Christmas story. And then God began to speak, oh man, back to me of just here's really what's going on, and just affirmed that yes, he does care, and that my hope was in the wrong things, and it needed to be in God's promise and in most of all in his presence. And so that's how this thing got started. I didn't plan on writing a book to begin with. It was just a God needed to take me to the woodshed, and so I started writing those things down, and it spoke to me. And then just kind of year after year, I'd go back to spend more time with Jesus,
Yeah.
and that's really the heart of where this thing came from.
Well, and I would imagine if a time like Easter, a time like Advent is also a time in which spending more time with Jesus is kind of what the season is directed to. Spend more time with Jesus. Christmas and Easter, those times in which the miraculous things that occurred really come sharply into focus. You're also, I mean, with your background, and especially as Dean of Arts and Humanities, exuding that or putting that down on paper would be something that would be natural to you. For some, it might be singing a song. For some, it might be writing a play. But for you, it was getting it down on paper. Talk a little bit about that process.
Well, I enjoy reading. I've got to read a lot of great books, and in my job, I get to read them over and over again. So I get a lot of exposure to just kind of the great literature throughout the world, particularly the Western world. And so words are kind of my playground. But even within this, I mean, there were times where I would sit down and say, I want to write one of these devotionals, or I want to write one of these meditations, and I would just sit down and start writing, and it'd be the stupidest thing you've ever seen. And
Highly
and really,
critical of your own work.
well, yes, but even within that, it was really like God needed to be a part of that process,
Great
and
point.
I could not do these without him, because it was really a dialogue. I mean, they're in a lot of ways a confessional. I mean, it doesn't get into specifics that are particular to me. I think they're universal principles that we all experience as Christians. But really, it was God working on me, and it was kind of born out of the words that God was giving to me. And so I don't want to scare anybody off with the book, but there's kind of a mystical kind of experience of just a personal conversation with God in a lot of ways.
Well, let me assure them, because I've had the privilege of hearing a number of them. You may call it mystical. What I call it is there is a depth to these devotions that is different from what you find in a normal Advent devotion. Normal Advent devotions really drive themselves around the Christmas story and around the retelling of the Christmas story. You kind of take it to a next stage, which is really, here's the Christmas story, but now this is what the Christmas story means to you. And by the way, that's a pretty universal statement. Christmas story really begins to, the application of the Christmas story really begins to sink in deeply because of these devotions. Having heard you and read a number of them, they're unique. This is a different type of Advent devotional book, because it's now in two forms, right? There's a paperback and there's also a coffee table version. Talk to us a little bit, Brandon, about the format, because there's something very unique about the format of Beneath Bethlehem Skies.
Yeah. So as you said, it doesn't follow the typical, here's a verse, anecdotal story, and a quick thought, get yourself out the door. These are really sit and soak type of readings. They really linger in kind of this thing called the already but not yet of salvation. Yeah. And so Chris Craig, our former music minister, said they're kind of a salt in the wound to start off with, and then you get to see the sweetness of Advent afterwards. And so they're born out of many of these writings, many of these essays and meditations start with a place of discontent or a place of hurt, a place of disillusionment with whatever our hopes are in the world, and it acknowledges the real pain that we feel and that we experience every day, and ask the question, God, where are you? Mm-hmm. And then as it begins to mix into the Christmas story, the Christmas story reminds us God has come. He has come to creation, embodied, yes, and felt all the sufferings that we encounter. And he cares about us, and he loves us, and he came to redeem us. And the meditations look to the things that God has done, and then they anticipate with the promises that have yet to be fulfilled that he's given us. But really, most of all, what they do is they're just a reassurance of God is with us right now. And he's with us in this room, and he's with us every day. And Christmas is one of the best reminders that we have of that, is that it affirms God's love for us and our broken world.
Well, even to that extent, the name Emmanuel just simply gives us the theology behind the Christmas story itself. His name alone, God with us, that's the answer. That's the solution that we're looking for at that time. Now, you set up how you're to engage with this devotional study. You set it up uniquely. Talk to us about, as you open the book, how you've laid out the book in order, for instance, what does a typical week of being in this devotion look like?
Okay, so the book you mentioned the two forms. There's really three forms of the book. There's an ebook as well of the paperback and the hardcover, and
Right.
they're all slightly different. They have different features and elements with each one of them. But the thing that's constant for all of them is they're really set up on kind of a 5-day cycle. And so the first of those 5 days is a collection of scriptures around a theme. For instance, the first one is the prophecies foretelling the Messiah's coming. Another one might be the I ams. Another one might be the actual nativity story. And so one day is just kind of the unedited, no comment. Just here's a collection of scripture passages, and then also within the next 4 days is you get 3 original meditations that I've written, centered around a particular theme, like exile and home, or joy or silence, things like that. And then the fifth reading of those days are trying to bring in other voices from the early church, because the early church
Mm.
has lots of different homilies speaking
Yeah.
to Advent, and so bringing in Athanasius or Anselm and some of those guys, and 2 of my favorites are actually not early church fathers necessarily. They're Virgil, the Roman pagan poet Virgil, who died about 20 years before Jesus came, and he wrote a poem called Eclogue 4, and it reads almost straight out of Isaiah, promising a golden age where the lion's going to lay down with the lamb,
Oh
and
my.
and so just kind of picking guys like that. John Milton's Paradise Lost. There's a beautiful scene and a dialogue between the Son and the Father in heaven, talking about how Jesus is going to come to earth and redeem the world, and that man will find his grace. So there's lots of different voices that are within this project. It's not just
Well,
mine.
you got a chance to really marry a lot of your passion. So your passion for
Sure.
scripture,
Yes.
your passion for writing, your passion for reading, really driving all that. And that's what I was trying to express, which you did a much better job than I did. There's a uniqueness to each week. So you get the scripture readings, you get the 3 devotions that you've written, and then you get the other voices of church fathers, people who have written about this Advent, who obviously it's touched them enough to write as well. It's a beautiful, beautiful entrance into this time of year, this Advent season. There's also, you also added the addition in the coffee table book.
Yes.
You've added graphics to it to bring a visual aspect to the marrying of these different forms of writing styles. Talk to us about the graphics for a minute.
So I wanted there to be some visual representation for some of this, and I'm not an artist. I can draw stick figures with the worst of them. And so there is a former student at Midland Classical Academy who is an amazing artist. She got an art degree and is beginning her career as an artist, and does all types of mediums. Her name's Rachel K. Long. You guys can look that up on her website, rachellong.com, and see just the work that she's done. But I invited her. I said, would you be willing to paint watercolors for each of these meditations? And she did a phenomenal job with that. She loves the Old Testament, and she loves the just the Hebraic roots within the Christmas story, and she brings a lot of those elements to life, of just incorporating little small subtleties that foretell Christ's coming in very symbolic and iconic ways through some really beautiful and very colorful art. And I've found things in my essays that I wasn't aware that was there, that she saw and drew out, and it's just could not be happier with the work that she's done.
Well, that brings to mind there are actually 2 artists at work here, because I would definitely classify you as an artist, but an artist of a different type. You write visual pictures, she paints visual pictures, and the marrying of those 2 is just, I've seen a number of her illustrations, a number of her paintings, her watercolors for these, and they're beautiful. They are a wonderful companion side by side with this. So for our audience, let me tell you very specifically, I highly recommend the coffee table book because you will get the benefit of these beautiful graphics that go along with the wonderfully written meditations that are a part of this Advent book. I can't recommend it more highly. Looking forward to the Advent season and breaking the spine of my copy to really begin to dive into it. You've also, though, talk about all forms of artistic expression. You've also added music to this as well in a certain
Yes.
format. Talk to us about the music edition.
So the music part of it is a digital album called Beneath Bethlehem Skies, the same title as the book. And it is a digital album, so it's streamable on Spotify, iTunes, Apple Music, and different streaming platforms throughout the world. I just mentioned the ones that I'm familiar with here in the United States. So it's available to experience that way, and really that's probably the native expression of these devotions. Was as I would write them, as you mentioned earlier, Mark, we would share them at church, and we'd play music in the background as I
Yes.
would read them. That would go along with the tone and the feel of everything that was going. And another musician, another common friend of ours, Luke McDonald, wrote the music for 10 of these devotions, and has helped me put a soundtrack for them. And so that's what the digital album consists of. He calls them soundscape music that he wrote. So I guess that's a fancier word than elevator music, but
Well,
he did a great job with it.
yeah, creating the appropriate environment in which to be visually stimulated and auditorily stimulated so that they get the full impact. That's, like I said, there is a uniqueness to this for anybody who chooses to engage in Advent this way. There is a uniqueness to this in the written word. There's a uniqueness to this in the visual expression of this and the auditory expression of this, that this takes in the full senses. You get the whole sense of Advent. I mean, I'm looking forward to experiencing that here in the coming months. So we now kind of have a little bit of a picture of this. I hope to have you back again so that we can actually let you read to us and several selections so that our audience can actually get an understanding of what it is they're looking at. But here's what I'd like to ask you to do. There is an ebook, there is a paperback, there is a coffee table book. How do we get a hold of one of those? Give us kind of the way that we can get a hold of each and every one of them, and even the digital download on the music.
So with the digital download on the music, I'll start there. The way you get that is if you subscribe to Apple Music, Google Play, Spotify. You should be able to already have the music that way. You could download them off of iTunes, and you could also order a CD from from Amazon. So you can order a CD from Amazon if that's the way you want to get it. And then for the books, it is simply just go to Amazon and look up Beneath Bethlehem Skies 26 Advent Meditations upon the Miracle and Meaning of Jesus' Birth. And that's where you can order any one of the three versions, the ebook, the paperback, or the coffee table version.
And kind of give us a retail cost so we at least have an idea.
Sure. So the ebook has the paintings in it as well. It's not limited by the print, so it has the paintings that are in there, full color, and that one is $9.95, and then the paperback version is $14.95, and the coffee table version is $30.
Okay, great. Anything else that you want to kind of bring out that we need to know to experience this to its fullest?
The project is designed to help people get to know Jesus more, and that's really what Christmas is God coming to earth to have a relationship with us, and with all the trappings and everything that goes on with Christmas, of the busy schedules, even for people that regularly go to church, it is very easy to get distracted. And so what this is just a moment to pause and be reminded of what God has done and what He's promised and what He will do. And so that's my heart for this, is that it helps us to re-encounter Christ each Christmas.
Well, and again, I'll tell our audience it's re-encountering Christ uniquely. I will just tell you, there is nothing I have seen on the market today that equals what this can do. There are multiple Advent books. You may have a favorite author, but I really do believe this is going to be one of your favorite things to do year after year after year at the Advent season, is to engage with this. I've got some favorite Advent books, and I read them year after year, but this, when I read them, when I meditate on them, when I soak them in, as you've said, they have a tendency to soak deeper than any Advent book I'm associated with. So there's a real depth to what's been written here that's accentuated by the music and accentuated by the images as well. It's a beautiful book. Congratulations on it getting actually published and out there.
It's a lot harder than writing.
Well, it is definitely tough to put that kind of depth in a very short statement, and you've done it beautifully. So,
God be the glory.
Thanks for sharing it with us. My guest today has been Brandon Shuman, good friend of mine, the author of Beneath Bethlehem Skies, a new Advent book that's coming out this Christmas. You can pick it up at Amazon. And we look forward to hearing good things about this. Brandon, I would like to invite you back. Maybe we'll come back again and let you do a couple of excerpts from us from the book so that people can get a real flavor for what this is about. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it, Brandon. Great to see you. And the rest of you, thank you for joining us here at the Grace Cafe. We look forward to seeing you again. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us through Grace School of Theology, gsot.edu. You can find us at the Grace Center for Spiritual Development, which is an extension of Grace School of Theology. So glad to have you with us. We look forward to seeing you again the next time.